Hello and welcome to another flight gear tutorial. Today I want to show you how to operate the Boeing 707 in flight gear in cold and snowy conditions. So what you see here is the screen of flight gear after startup, and we are now located on the Moscow Sheremetyevo airport. And the plan for today is to go from the Moscow Sheremetyevo airport to Jekaterinburg in the Ural mountain range. So that's around 700 miles to the east. And this is our local weather now. So we're in the middle of January. You see it is freezing cold and also snowy. So the windscreen is already snow covered. Let's get into the startup. First, we configure the fuel. So I go to equipment and fuel. And as you can see, I have already prepared the fuel configuration. So I've emptied the reserve tanks 1 and 4. And I've balanced the main tanks with around 15,000 pounds of fuel each. And also emptied the center tank. So that's okay for startup. Now we enter the startup sequence. I use the auto start, because it is very nicely animated with all the voices of the flight engineers, so it's really worth trying this at least for once. So we start the auto start. And it takes several minutes, and that also gives us enough time to configure the plane for takeoff. First, we enter the planned route into the route manager, but we will mostly rely on VOR navigation and GPS. So we go with the default takeoff pattern. Arrival in uniform, triple Sierra. Now you can see it better. If you don't see the writing, then you can zoom in, and that normally solves the problem. 300 knots cruising speed. Cruising altitude, as we're flying eastbound, it should be an uneven number, so 33,000 feet. I don't want to make the choice about the runway yet, so I close the route manager and reopen it, and then this field is emptied.
Starting 3 now.
No approach pattern, no stars. That's okay. We activate, and now the route is okay. Then with the Yankee button on my keyboard, I make the yoke disappear to have a better view of the instruments. Next, the speed for the autothrottle I set to 240 to stay below the speed limit of 250 knots below 10,000 feet. Climb rate of 2,000 feet per minute here in the vertical speedometer. Then next thing, GPS, we want to go to uniform triple Sierra, which is the Koltsovo airport in Jekaterinburg. Here you can see it, Koltsovo. Distance, almost 800 nautical miles. Bearing 66. So with this right button here, we turn it to 66 degrees. I'm not sure if you can see it in the YouTube video, but here on the lower left corner, there you get the precise information about the settings that you entered, for example QNH and also speeds. But sometimes the lower part of the picture is cut off by the YouTube video editor. But in the flight gear simulator, you can always get this useful information in the lower left corner. Now we want to configure the QNH. You can either just look into the environment here. So the QNH is 1019. So we have sort of high pressure now. Here you can turn it, and you can see it in the lower left corner again. Turn to 1019. But I will also configure the radio stack to receive the ATIS information from the Moscow Sheremetyevo airport. So the engineers are done with their startup work. You get these messages also here on top. Okay, let's have a look in the radio stack. ATC. Double uniform, double echo is Sheremetyevo. ATIS 125.12. 125.12. Okay, here we get the ATIS information on the radio, and it should confirm the same QNH. And later we will also configure the, well, we can configure it now, but we will receive it later. So the ATIS information for Kosovo Airport, uniform Triple Sierra, ATIS 127.8. 127.8. Okay, I could configure the squawk here, but I'd like to do it in the overhead panel. It's much nicer. It's very nicely animated. So we choose a squawk. Let's say 4000 and go to altitude mode Sierra. Then some more things to be configured in the overhead panel. First we turn on the dashboard lighting, because visibility is quite low at the moment, so we activate the headlights. And later we have to configure some more things here in the overhead panel according to the plane's checklist once we're up in the air. Also, we have to go to the flight engineer's position and do some adjustments according to the checklist. I will show you the checklist later. So that's it for the moment. Okay, what else do we have to do? I think this is it for the moment. I think we're ready for takeoff. Almost ready. So we go to flaps position 2. Here you got the flaps indicator on the right, and I release the parking brake. Okay, now we're ready to go. One more thing, as it's snowing, so what you need is the window heater. Go to the overhead panel again. Let's see the window heater. We switch it on immediately, and we also will set the windshield wiper to low to make sure that that we don't have the windshield covered with snow. You see, it helps a little. Now we're really ready to go. And as usual, 40% of engine thrust to synchronize the 4 engines of the Boeing 707. And now we use full thrust. Push the thrust levers forward to the maximum. Use the rudder to stay on the center line. And around 150 knots we are fast enough to rotate. Look how nicely the snowflakes are animated here, so it is really an improvement now with the new Flightgear version. So we lift off, go back 1 flaps position and retract the gear. Let's see from outside. It shows the Pan Am livery. Let's not climb too steep. A climb rate of 2,000 feet per minute will do. So make sure your plane is leveled if you have low visibility, and that the climb rate, that you have a positive climb rate, but not too steep, otherwise you will get into a stall. I use the elevator trim here to get to a climb rate of around 2,000 feet per minute. Now we can activate the autopilot here with this button. I will give you a little autopilot tutorial later. We go to auto throttle to adjust to 240 knots. We're a little bit over speeding at the moment. We would get a speed ticket, and we go for the pre-selected heading following this red heading button. And vertical speed. We want to follow here the speedometer, the vertical speedometer, to go to 2000 feet per minute. We are still on flaps position 1. Now we go to flaps up. Once we're above the clouds, we don't need the windshield wipers anymore. There's a little extra, it's a kind of an Easter egg. When you click here between the front light switches, then you have this compass unfolding. It's a very nice extra for your cruising flight level. Okay, so now everything is stable. We're climbing with 2000 feet per minute. We are on 240 knots. We're on our pre-selected course. We can check again, because the course, it will change over time. You have to, if you don't follow your pre-selected route, then you should check the bearing from time to time, because it will change. Now it's 66. It's still okay. Okay. So as we're above 5,000 feet, above the transition flight level, now we go to standard air pressure, 29.92 inches. Standard air pressure. Okay, and I switch off the ATIS voice. We don't need it at the moment anymore. I switch to the Kosovo ATIS, so we will hopefully receive it once we're maybe 100 miles away from the Kosovo airport in Jekaterinburg. Okay, we silence this. And now we have to finish all the tasks on our checklist. So I go to the overhead panel. Normally this is the central pedestal view, but I just look up and then I have the overhead panel in view. And now you can have a look in the checklist, but be careful, don't click again on auto start, because it would shut down all your engines and it's very difficult to restart them in flight. So make sure that you don't hit the auto start again. It can have disastrous consequences. So if you use the checklist at all, make sure you really click on checklist and not on any other option here. So the checklist, and you can see most of the tasks are already fulfilled, and now there are just a few left that we will perform now. So first, the yaw damper. Where is it? When you click on the question mark, you get a green circle. Where is it located? Here, the yaw damper. So you click it to on to stabilize the plane around its vertical axis. Then the compass controller. The primary compass controller is set correctly already, but the secondary compass controller needs some manual input. Where is it? Here on the right. First of all, you flip down this switch, so you adjust everything like on the primary compass controller. First you flip down this switch. We are in the northern hemisphere, so this switch must be set to November, also this to November and not to south, to Sierra. And then we have to turn this, and this time you really need to look at the lower left corner, because there is some information. First of all, your actual latitude, it's 56 degrees north. And you have to adjust both compass controllers to the same latitude, 56 north. So when you click it, it goes up in steps of 10. And when you turn the mouse wheel, it goes up in steps of 1. And both have to be set to 56 degrees north. And now they are both set to 56 degrees. And you should check your latitude from time to time, because if you're flying south or northbound, of course, the latitude will change, and then you have to adjust your compass controllers accordingly. Otherwise, you will have a deviation in your navigation system. You cannot fully rely on the compass anymore if you don't adjust it to the new latitude. So Now the checklist is also satisfied with this. The compass controller has now turned green, and now the last task on the checklist, the air compressor number 3. For that we have to go to the engineer's position, and it is this center gauge here. What you have to do, you see here, the air condition switches are flipped down. That's okay. Only here, this one is still up, so you flip it down, and then you have to restart the air condition compressor. Sometimes it doesn't work, then you have to repeat this sequence. Now it worked at the first try, so it seems to be stable. This switch went into the center position, and we check again the checklist. Again, make sure not to hit the auto start button. Checklist. Now this is also fulfilled, so also air compressor number 3 is on. We have completed the checklist. What is very important when you go to higher altitude is that anti-ice is activated, otherwise you may lose control of the airplane. So wing anti-ice must be set to on. These nacelle anti-ice must be set to on. Also make sure that the window heaters are on. Okay, so I will turn off the windshield. Turn off the windshield wiper. Okay. Okay, turn off the ATIS voice. Now we're way above 10,000 feet, so first of all we can turn off the headlights and we can speed up. We go up to 300 knots. And no, we're at... Aha, okay, that was the pre-selected altitude. So we go to altitude mode, and then our target altitude, our cruising flight level is flight level 330. So I just turn it up manually. When you click this button, it goes up in steps of 1. That's for fine-tuning. And when you turn with the mouse wheel, it goes up in hundreds. So it's still a lot of turning with the mouse wheel. And so we go up to 33,000. 33. Okay. I will still not activate the yokes with the Yankee button again, because we need it only then for manual landing on short final. Okay, the plane is speeding up. We have 4 powerful engines, so it's no problem. Climbing and speeding up at the same time. Okay, and now I think it's time for this little autopilot tutorial. First, let's check the bearing. 66 is unchanged, so that's still okay. We can have a look at the map. So the purple line is our route that we entered into the route manager. And here in the east it is the Kosovo airport in Jekaterinburg. I will enter the data of the ILS and also of the VOR DME radio here. I will enter this later when we are descending from our cruising flight level. Okay, while we're still climbing, let's get into the autopilot. So here is your dashboard for the autopilot. To switch it on, you simply press AP. This activates the autopilot, and then it is activated normally with no options at all. Heading, that's almost self-explaining. When you press on heading, then the plane will follow this red heading bug on your compass instrument, which you can adjust with this dial on the right. So when you turn, you see the plane will be banking to the left and again banking to the right. and I readjust it to 66 degrees heading mode. Then altitude mode means first when you press it, the plane keeps the current altitude, and then by turning this dial here on the right of your altitude selector, you make the plane climb or descend. So just follow these values when you are on altitude. Once you click it, when you click it once, then it will adjust to the current altitude. So I deactivate it and activate it, and you see we were jumping from 33 to 24,000 feet because this is our current altitude. We now still keep climbing, but this comes to a standstill now. So now we have selected altitude hold, and now we will go up again. The alternative for climbing or descending is to use the vertical speed. Here is your vertical speedometer, and with this smaller indicator, when you turn with the mouse wheel or click on it, you can choose a vertical speed, let's say 1500 feet per minute, and when I click on vertical speed, then the autopilot ignores the altitude information and simply makes the plane climb with the climb rate that you have selected here. And be careful, it will not stop climbing just because you reach the value that is here in your altitude selector. You have to stop the climb then manually if you go for the vertical speed option. Okay, IAS, the indicated airspeed, it's the auto throttle to make the plane follow this red and white indicator where you select your target speed. So when you use the mouse wheel here, you can change the target speed. When you click on the speedometer, then it jumps up in intervals of 10 knots. So I go to 300 again, 300 knots, and the plane will try to achieve a speed of 300 knots. At the moment it isn't able to do that because we are still climbing. Later it will be able to achieve 290 or 300 knots once we're on level flight. Okay, GPS makes the plane follow the pre-selected route in your route manager. So the next checkpoint in the route manager is our destination airport, Kosovo. So if I click on GPS, the plane will turn. It will turn to the right. It should bank a little to the right to directly aim for the Kosovo airport. I click GPS, and now it should be slightly banking to the right. You can see it here with this dotted line to aim directly for the last checkpoint on the route, or for the currently active, this orange checkpoint on the route. So now we're in GPS mode. Nav makes the plane follow your pre-selected heading to the VOR that you have entered here in your radio stack. Vertical speed minus 200, this is wrong. So we go for altitude mode and go up. So I want to go to the pre-selected heading. So nav is for VOR navigation, and approach here on the lower right side, it is to make the plane follow the glide slope when you're on short final, when there is a glide slope in your ILS active. So I want to select 33,000 feet again, so I click until I get the full 100, and then turn to select 33,000. And now the plane should climb with an optimal climb rate to the pre-selected altitude of 33,000. Okay, now we're back to our standard settings. Now let's discuss the radio stack. You got the pilot and co-pilot side here, and here on top you see COM for communication. So these values here on the left side you get the currently active frequency, and on the right side you get the standby frequency, and as usual you can switch them with this switch button here. And this is for communication. For example, you can receive ATIS messages from the airport, or also emergency messages. Its emergency frequency is 121.5. 121.5. Okay. Then you got the navigation frequency. Here you can enter your VOR frequency and ILS. And down here for non-directional beacons you got ADF in the kilohertz range. So we're not using... We could, for example, enter this one, 307 kilohertz. And now we should be able to receive it. These are set to ADF. Okay, now it seems to work. So the thin needle should be pointing to this NDB here. And the other one, 478. It's the secondary, that's on the other side. That should be the double needle pointing then backwards. 478. You see? This is this Narionovo NDB. Now we got some real ADF radio receiving, and here with these two switches you can choose between VOR in the megahertz range and ADF in the kilohertz range. Okay, we are now on our cruising flight level. The plane should also speed up. Please try to reach our target speed of 300 knots. And now we will enter the target values for navigation on our destination airport. First, we enter the VOR frequency. We're 113.2. Okay. And for example, for this ILS. For runway 08 right, we use 109.9 megahertz. So that's on standby. And I will enter the same VOR frequency also into the secondary radio, so that I can receive the DME distance information. 13.2. Okay, and to make use of the navigation radio, first of all, I can enter also the runway direction. The runway heading is 079. This is now there are some things that you have to do in the compass instrument and with these two switches. So first of all, I enter the runway heading 079, but I can also use this VOR heading for VOR navigation. That's something we will do later. We will use the Kosovo VOR to navigate around the airport. And now these two switches here are also very useful and very important. Here you can switch between navigation radio 1 and 2, so that you can quickly switch between these two. So I will choose navigation radio 2 at the moment. Here I can go to the ILS frequency, and then I go to the VOR number 2, which gives me the VOR frequency. And this switch on the left, it changes from VOR information to GPS information, and so instead of showing here in this distance meter, it shows me not the information how far I'm away from the next VOR, but from the next GPS waypoint in the route. Let's have a look. Route manager. The active checkpoint is here, Kosovo. It's 700 miles away. And when I flip down this switch, I see this information, how far we are now out from this GPS checkpoint. So when you're still on your way, when you're far away, I suggest that you flip it down, and later when you're close to the airport and receive the VOR signal, then you flip it up, and then you can receive the VOR and especially the DME information. So this switch, it switches between VOR 1 and 2 for the DME, but not here in this instrument. This instrument is always adjusted to your radio VOR number 1 and not to VOR number 2. This is for the co-pilot. But you can use this frequency, 113.2, for the DME. Okay, and this is it for the moment. So we have a long way to go, and I don't want to bore you with a long level flight here on our cruising flight level 330. So I will do a little time warp. I will stop the video recording and restart it once we're 100 miles out from our destination. So see you again in a moment. Okay, so welcome back to our flight simulation from Moscow to Jekaterinburg. After this little time warp, we are now 136 miles out. So we can prepare for the descent. First we reduce the speed to 250 knots. As you can see here in the autopilot, I switched from heading mode to GPS mode because I was just tired of adjusting to the new heading all the time. As you remember, the heading was 66066, and now when we look at GPS, it's 079, so it has turned quite a bit, and you don't want to constantly adjust this. So we will now adjust it to 079. But what we also want to use now is VOR navigation, so that we can do a left turn. First of all, we try to receive the ATIS information from Kosovo. Okay, as the engines are quite loud, when it's difficult to understand the ATIS information, there's a little trick. You go into the view options, and for example you choose the tower look, and then of course when you go to this with a Victor button, now you can hear the ATIS information crystal clear.
Initial contact, you have information Victor. This is Kosovo Airport information.
Okay, we'll use this later. We will start our descent now. So we go with a vertical speed of 2000 minus 2000 feet per minute, and to make sure that we don't speed up, we will use speed brakes. Either with Control Bravo you can extend the speed brakes completely, or in steps by just clicking on it. I will go to a medium setting and now go for vertical speed, and now we should be descending because I selected minus 2000 here. You see? The vertical speedometer, it goes down, and now we start descending, and I want a high descent rate to make sure that we're low enough when we are close to the Kosovo airport. Let's see from outside. You can see the air brakes extended, and we're pitching down.
Feet, temperature -11, dew point -14, QNH 1021 hectopascal or 30.15 inches. No SID. Advise on
3015 is the QNH in inches.
This is
And we want the runway information.
Victor. Time 1000 Zulu. Expect ILS approach, landing and departing runway 26. Weather, wind 290 at 9 knots. Visibility 9 kilometers. Light snow, scattered 4,000 feet. Temperature -11. Dew point -14. QNH 1021 hectopascal or 30.15.
So, as you've heard, runway 26 is in operation for takeoff and landing. So we're coming in from the wrong direction. We will do the usual maneuver. Once we are 20 miles out, we will fly a DME arc in a clockwise direction around the VOR. So we start turning left in a 90 degrees angle once we're 22 miles out, and it takes 2 miles to perform this left turn. And then we will go for 180 degrees around the airport and then intercept the ILS coming from the north. So we use our standard DME arc maneuver. Now we have to make sure that we are losing enough altitude, so I will even increase the sink rate to 2500. If we're speeding up, I have to use more speed brakes then. Okay, now we can switch back from GPS to DME information. And it's the DME number 2, because this 109.9, that's the ILS frequency, but it's the wrong ILS frequency. We need the new ILS frequency for runway 26 and not for runway 08. But the secondary radio is correct. 113.2 is the frequency of the VOR DME located on the Kosovo airport. And this now gives us the DME information about the distance to this beacon. So we have to readjust the ILS information. We want to descend to 11,000 feet and later to 5,000 with a lower speed. We want to descend while we are doing the DME arc. We want to descend to 5,000 feet. That should be the beginning of our ILS maneuver. So we need the map again. It's open already. Data. We need the information for we want to use the longer runway here, so that's 27 left. And let's check for the frequency. 26 left. 109.5. 109.5. And the heading is 258. Okay, we're now in GPS mode, not in heading mode, so we are free to change the heading bug. So we will turn left 90 degrees, we will go to something around 0 degrees here. To turn north once we are 22 miles out from the VOR DME. So heading 0. I will keep the map open. In fact, I don't need it. The instruments of the 707 are so well built, it is really good enough for navigation. But just for you as an information, what's going on, how we do this DME arc, I will show it to you. But I will rely, to perform the DM arc maneuver, I will rely on the distance information of the DME and on turning the heading bug here. You don't really need the map. Once you've practiced this 1 or 2 times, you will be able to perform DME arc with the Boeing 707 without using the map. Okay, I think we can reduce the sink rate. So, to make sure that we stop at the right point in time, I will enter the altitude information here. Okay, and now we go down to 11,000 feet. And now the plane will descend with a standard sink rate instead of this high sink rate that I entered. Okay, 11,000 feet. We're still in GPS mode, and we will change to heading mode later, once we're 22 miles out, to perform this left turn to heading 0. And when we descend further, below 10,000 feet, we have to reduce speed, not to break the speed limit of 250 knots. Okay, there's also some good squawk information. What are the different standard squawks? So the squawk that we use, 4000, that's a standard squawk for flying with instrument flight rules, IFR. But when you're in an emergency, you can also use 7500 for aircraft hijacking. 75 man with a knife is this memory. 76, my radio needs a fix. So I've lost communication, my radio stack isn't working anymore, I have technical problems with the radio communication. And 77, I'm falling from heaven, means I'm in an emergency situation, I need immediate assistance. For example, I need vectoring to a free runway for an emergency landing. Okay. We can retract the speed brakes. Control Bravo, and then it is retracted. Check from outside. Now the speed brakes are retracted. The plane does auto trim here with the trim wheel. So this would be almost the perfect heading to come to go straight in, but unfortunately the wind comes from the west, so we need to do this DME arc to go on a different course to come from the east on a western course. Okay, I will use time compression because this is there's not much going on, so I will use the time cheat to speed up until we are 22 miles out. The plane should level when it's at 11,000 feet. See, the sync rate slows down already. And here we will go for a standard sync rate of, let's say, 800 feet per minute. That's also good enough for the glide path to intercept the glide slope. So the Boeing 707 is my overall favorite airplane in Flightgear. It has so many beautiful details, all those instruments, and it's really a joy flying this plane. Or even when you have this old-fashioned non-glass cockpit, it is really so well made and so easy, and it is not. It is no wonder that pilots used this plane for so many decades also in reality. So this is a very well-made plane in reality as well as in flight gear. And if you haven't tried it yet, I really recommend you give the Boeing 707 a shot. It's really a lot of fun flying this plane. Okay, what we can also do, if we got enough fuel left, you see we got more than enough fuel, so we can jettison some fuel. We go to the engineer's position, and here you got the fuel management with the crossfeed valves here, and here you got the board for fuel jettison. Okay, you can jettison fuel from the main tanks. So you extend the jettison valves, and then you can open. And maybe we can even see some chemtrails. Fuel and payload. You see now the fuel level drops very rapidly, so we have to make sure that we don't forget. I always, when I do something with the fuel management, I keep this menu open as a reminder that there's something going on. And let's see from outside. Here you can see the chemtrails from your fuel jettison. Very nicely animated. You see how we are spraying the fuel? Very beautifully made. Okay, we can now start our descent to 5,000 feet. So first we reduce the speed to 220. It's also good for doing tight turns. 28, so we have to get ready for... Okay. And close it. That should do. Down to 5,000 feet with the standard sink rate. Now that we're already on a low flight level, I want to make sure that we don't sink too far. If I forget about this, I want the plane to level by itself. So that we're below 10,000 feet, I activate the headlights, I retract this compass, and now at 22 we will go to heading mode, and that should make the plane bank to the left to follow this red heading bug to go on a northern course. And from now on we will rely on the DME information and on the heading bug for navigation. Also, we check the QNH again, because when we're on 5,000 feet below, when we're below transition level, we want to go to the air pressure, to the QNH of the Kosovo airport.
You have information Victor. This is Kosovo Airport Information Victor. Time 1000 Zulu. Expect ILS approach, landing and departing runway 26. Weather, wind 290 at 9 knots. Visibility 9 kilometers. Light snow, scattered 4,000 feet. Temperature -11. Dew point -14. QNH 1021 hectopascal or 30.15 inches. No SID.
So, you've heard it, 30.15 inches. That's what we will dial into the altimeter once we're below 6,000 feet. Okay, whenever the distance goes up 1 decimal, I make a 10 degrees turn to the right. So we're at 19.5, at 19.6, I will make the right turn. So as long as you stay in a plus minus 2 miles corridor, you're doing fine with the DME arc. So between 18 and 22 miles, it's all okay. So now we're going up to the 6. Let's turn to the right 10 degrees and wait until it increases again. We wait for the plane to level and then watch the DME information. You always need a little patience when you do this DME arc maneuver. Okay, so we are now below 6,000 feet. We adjust to 30.15 inches QNH. Okay. We're now at 19.7. When we're at 8, we do the 10 degrees turn to the right. Go to 20 degrees heading 0 to 0. Let's check the fuel again. Should be okay. As we're flying slowly now, there's not so much drag anymore, so we're not using up so much fuel. Should be okay. 19.8. When we're at 19.9, we do the next right turn 10 degrees. Let's go to 700 feet sync rate. Okay, next right turn 10 degrees. Wait for the wings to level and then check in the distance information. With the Charlie button, you can make the cockpit disappear, and then you can have a look around. So you see that it's slow. Okay. 20.1, we will make the next right turn. So it's not necessary to fly a perfect circle for this DME arc. If you widen the circle a little bit, it's okay. So if it widens for 1 or 2 miles altogether during the course of your DME arc, that's perfectly acceptable. Let's recheck the frequency. Okay, now we are already adjusted to the ILS frequency, so that's okay. We can, just for fun, we can also activate this radar. It shows you here, you can adjust the radar range, and here you can turn it on and off, and there you can see if there are other planes around, so that can be helpful in densely populated airspace to make sure that you're not getting any proximity warning with other airplanes. So we make the next right turn 10 degrees. Then check the fuel. Okay, fuel is okay. decimal 4 and can make the next right turn. So when we're at 170 degrees, I will not turn the plane to 180 degrees because that might be already too late to intercept the ILS. I subtract 10 degrees, so when we're at 170 degrees heading, then I will do another tighter right turn to intercept the ILS with a 40-50 degrees angle. So that's my rule of thumb. I subtract 90 degrees and then another 10 degrees from the runway heading. Okay, let's do the next right turn, 10 degrees. Now we're at 70. Let's see how the runway lighting is animated in the new 2018 Flightgear version. I think they made great improvements with the landing lights, so that you don't have to change here with the rendering options. These use point sprites. You don't need to click this away for night flights anymore. So this is really a great improvement. Okay, we do the next 10 degrees turn to 80. Heading 80. So we didn't receive any icing warnings during the flight, so it seems that we got the heat management right, also with fuel heating and with the window heaters and with the wings de-icing. It seems to have worked out well. Okay, to speed things up a little, I will do time compression again. Okay. Another 10 degrees. Once we're at 160 degrees, I will stop the time compression. Another 10 degrees. So this is the maximum BME arc, 180 degrees. So it takes quite some time. And another 10 degrees. 130. $140. $150. And 160. Okay, enough of time cheating. Now when we go to 170, I will turn more to the right to intercept the ILS. Once we're here on the next decimal, it's time to turn right. Okay, 21.5, and now we do the right turn. You can always use this needle here as orientation. -30, -40 degrees in relation to this white needle here is okay. Okay, and now we watch this white needle. Once it starts centering, we go to navigation to intercept the ILS signal. Maybe we have to activate the windscreen wiper again. Okay. Now we can also activate the yoke. And get now the yoke is in the way. We will activate it later once we are aligned with the runway. Okay, navigation, and start sinking with 700 feet per minute. Also reduce the speed to 200. Go to flaps position 1. Once we're aligned with the runway, I will deactivate the map. Once we got the runway in sight, I will deactivate the autopilot. This plane handles very nicely in manual mode. Okay. Subsequently, we reduce the speed and more flaps. Here you can see flaps position 2, 190 knots. We're 16 miles out. Let's see if we can also get a DME information from the ILS radio. No. So we keep the DME with the VOR on the right here, and we keep the horizontal orientation with the ILS frequency. Okay, watch the altimeter. Maybe we sink a little with a lower sink rate, 500 feet per minute. Okay, now you see we're aligned with the runway, with the ILS. We're now locked on the ILS signal. We really don't need the map anymore. Now we reduce the speed even more, 180, and go to the next flaps position. We got those old-fashioned overhead windows here to see when we are flying tight turns, to have a good look around. Okay, I think I can already see the runway lights on the horizon. Let's reduce the speed even more, 170. We're already almost on full flaps. I keep the flaps position as it is now. Okay, we don't need the ATIS information. We go to the emergency frequency instead. Okay, we go to 160 knots, and as we got the runway clear in sight, I will lower the gear. See, visibility is poor, that's why we have to do this ILS approach. Let's go down to 155 knots. And as we're not perfectly aligned with the runway, I will change to manual controls now. Just by pressing this AP button will completely disable the autopilot. And do a little left turn. Make sure with your throttle, the throttle controls, that you keep the right speed. We are too fast and we're a little too low, so I will level the flight. Make sure that here you got no sink rate anymore. So all the landing lights are 4 landing lights are red, so that's a little bit too low. We just keep the level until we got 2 red and 2 white lights. Here you also see we are below the glide slope, because this horizontal red needle, it is above the center. Now we are on the correct glide path. Now I can see 2 white and 2 red landing lights on the runway. A little too slow. Let's add some more thrust. But I will not use full flaps today. I will leave one flaps position. Now we're a little too high. Let's pitch down and also trim down. Also too fast. Around 140 knots would be perfect. 140, 145 knots. Can still reduce thrust. We will be aiming for that green line. Let's push down the nose a little more. And pitch up again. Still aiming for the green line. Okay, and we flare up. Reduce throttle to idle. Thrust reversal. And now that we're below 100 knots, we can use the wheel brakes. An interesting light effect. I think it is in combination with the windscreen wiper. Yeah, it is the windscreen wiper that makes this funny effect, but somehow I like it better. Okay, that's good enough. Disabled the center light, so let's retract the flaps. See really dense snow. Turn to the left to follow the taxiway. We're a little bit off track. Not just a little bit, we're clearly off track. little bit of lawn mowing. Okay, and here we are in the Kosovo airport in Jekaterinburg in the Ural mountain range. We're at the end of this little Boeing 707 tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and see you again next time. Goodbye.